Before I say anything else today, I need you to do something unusual. I need you to slow your internal pace. Not because I'm about to say something soft, but because this is the part that most people rush past. They miss it. We live in noise, constant noise, sometimes good noise, sometimes spiritual noise, but noise. Messages, podcasts, content, people. But growth rarely happens in noise. In fact, growth happens in the quiet moments where no one is telling you who you should be. It happens when you're left alone with who you believe you are. So imagine this moment. No background sound, no performance, just you. Maybe it's early in the morning before the house wakes up. Maybe it's late at night when everything shuts down. And in that space, there's a thought that floats up. One that we don't usually let stay long. It doesn't sound rebellious. It doesn't sound angry. It sounds honest. God, I believe you can do anything. I just don't know how much of that applies to me. And it's not because of doubt. It's not necessarily because you're far away. It's not even because you stopped believing. Because along the way, something subtle happened. Your belief in your place inside the story of life quietly shrank. And you didn't even notice it shrinking. It happens gradually, maybe through disappointment, delay, or unanswered prayers. Sometimes it happens through moments where obedience doesn't produce immediate results. And if you're there, I'm going to ask you something personal. When you picture God looking at your life, what expression do you see? Expectation, disappointment, pride, concern? In your mind, does he see potential that is still unfolding, or does he see correction and things that you need to fix? Because here's the tension that sits beneath us. Often we trust God's ability to do great things. We trust his power to transform circumstance. But when it comes to how he sees us, we hesitate. And that hesitation doesn't just stay theoretical, by the way. It affects how boldly you move. It affects how much responsibility you're willing to carry. It affects how available you make yourself as opposed to being closed off. Today is not about self-esteem. This video is not about convincing you that you're amazing. It's about alignment. Because when your self-view is smaller than God's view of you, you will unknowingly resist the very future that you're asking for. There is a gap shaping your decisions right now. It's not obvious, it doesn't scream. It just quietly influences every area. And it's not a behavior gap, it's not a discipline gap. It's not even a belief gap. It's an identity gap. It's the very space between who God says you are and who you allow yourself to believe that you are. This gap is where hesitation lives. It's what actually slows us down in life. It's the very gap that although we are inspired deeply in life, we still live cautiously. Because don't get it twisted, you could still be faithful and still play small. You can still be committed and still avoid responsibility. And it's not because we don't trust the plan, but often it's because we don't fully trust the assessment that God has of us. And here's what makes the gap dangerous. It don't feel like rebellion. It actually feels responsible. Because you're not saying that you're afraid. You're telling yourself things like, I'm just being realistic. I'm just being wise. I'm waiting on timing. But deep down, there's a grief that you don't quite have the language for, because you sense that there's more in you, there's more capacity, there's more influence, and there's more responsibility. And yet you keep shrinking your life down to what feels manageable. And before you know it, small living becomes the norm. That's what makes the gap so powerful, is that it slowly rewrites our definition of normal. At first, hesitation feels temporary, then it feels cautious, then it feels wise, and then it feels permanent. And the thing is, you don't even notice when you stop asking certain questions. You stop asking, what if God actually wants to use me? What if the stirring I'm feeling is from him? Instead, your prayers get safer, your expectations get smaller, and your obedience gets conditional. And we end up calling it maturity. But I want you to hear me. Small living is rarely a conscious decision. It's the result of repeated self-protection. And the tragedy is, you and I can be deeply sincere and yet deeply misaligned. Fear seems intelligent. It doesn't sound dramatic. It doesn't announce itself loudly. Fear knows how to quote wisdom. And that's when you hear things like, I just want to be discerning. I don't want to get ahead of God on your best day. On your best day, you ain't holding a candle to God. I need more clarity. And don't get me wrong, discernment matters. Wisdom matters. But can I offer you a question that will reveal fear? Are you waiting for permission or are you waiting for certainty? Because certainty is never required before our obedience. And we often evaluate ourselves by our limitation. I'm just this, I only have that. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Start this business, who knows what'll come of it. I don't want to waste the years, as if you're not already. And what's crazy is while we often evaluate ourselves by our limitation, conversely, we are being evaluated by calling and purpose. We tend to judge ourselves by what we've survived, but God judges us by what He planted in us. And when we consult our past, we disqualify our future before it even arrives. And the problem is that we look at what we lack instead of what has been placed in us. I'm reading a story about a guy who was in a season where he trusted God completely, but he didn't trust God's view. And in the story, he wasn't rebellious, he wasn't running, he wasn't saying no. He was just waiting to feel more confident, waiting to feel more prepared, waiting to feel less afraid. And he wrapped his gift in spiritual language. He put it in a box that said, I'm just being humble. He put wrapping paper around it that said, I'm just being patient. He threw a bow on top that said, I'm just being wise. But clarity has a way of exposing things that hindsight couldn't. The man began to realize that it wasn't humility, it was fear wearing a faithful mask. He didn't disobey directly. He delayed obedience long enough to feel safe. And he ended up realizing that delay had a cost. And just like that man, you and I, we find ourselves in the same situation, where our delay costs our momentum and our growth. Our delay keeps us operating beneath the weight of what obedience requires. Because obedience doesn't wait for comfort, it moves on trust. And I don't know if you've been here, but I was here. You reach the point where living from self-evaluation becomes exhausting. And the reason is because every decision we make has to pass through the fear filter first. Am I ready? What if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I disappoint God? And in that moment, we begin to overthink every step. We wait for confidence before movement. We demand clarity before commitment, as if God asked us to approve our assignment when He gave it to us. Faith calls things that are not as though they were. That means that it speaks to who we are becoming and not just to who we've been. Faith was never designed to follow certainty. Faith was designed to create it. And there's a question that draws the line in the sand. It's not, do you believe in God? It's, do you believe God's view of you? Because the way we answer that question, it determines whether we live cautiously or courageously. Because if we only see flaws, we'll live carefully, full of care. If we only see weakness, we'll shrink responsibility. We will not respond with our ability. But when we begin to trust God's assessment, courage shows up without effort. Not because we suddenly feel confident, but because His word finally outweighs our feelings. So I ask you the question that I've had to ask myself. Where have I been asking for permission that God already gave? What step have I delayed under the guise of wisdom when really it's just self-protection? And who could I become if I trusted God's view of me over my own? Seeing yourself too small is not humility, it's hesitation. And in part 2, we're going deeper. Because identity isn't just how you see yourself, but it's how you move. We're going to talk about alignment, authority, and surrender, and why this message isn't just about becoming bigger. but trusting a bigger God. Because the ultimate identity shift isn't in believing in yourself more, it's believing God more clearly. If you enjoyed that video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, become an expander. And always remember that growth is a journey. It's not a destination. I'm in it with you. I'll see you on the next one.